So we are here this afternoon with the great MMA coach, MMA founder of New Wave Academy, Mr. Colin Nwadike. How are you feeling today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Outstanding but improving. Now again, it's such a pleasure to have you on here today. I've had an opportunity to speak with you, multiple times, but to be able to bless the people with your inspiration, your knowledge is always a pleasure. So for those who don't already know you, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into the world of combat sports.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my name's Colin. I am the owner of New Wave Academy. I've got a business partner for the Croydon and Bromley branch. We've got three branches. We've got Croydon, we've got Bromley, and we've got Penge. For Penge, we've got two other guys who are business partners with us as well. And my martial arts journey, I mean, it's been my whole life. I started when I was 9 years old. And I started with Kung Fu. I grew up in Battersea, so I'm from southwest London.
Okay.
And I started with Kung Fu, and then from there I moved into Taekwondo. Then did a bit of karate, and then through my teens I started boxing and doing kickboxing. I mean, I was always into sort of very physical sports. Alongside the martial arts, I played a lot of football as well. Actually, I played a lot of football and a lot of rugby. And then I went off to university, and while I was at university, I didn't do any martial arts at all. Came back and went back to my Thai boxing when I was back in London. Now, I went to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine from childhood. I went round to see him, and he had another friend, a mutual friend, who turned out to be a mutual friend in the end. I was around his flat and I was having a look, and he had some magazines which were, I think they were called Ultimate Grappling at the time. And I had a look, and it's all about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu I was aware of from the early UFCs, from the Hoist Gracie and so on and so forth. But it wasn't really a thing in this country. So I was quite surprised to realise that it was actually a whole industry in itself outside of that particular family, right? Because it was always promoted as like, it's our family martial art and so on and so forth. So I was fascinated by it. So I was flicking through the magazine, and my friend actually said, "Well, I train in London. If you want to come along and start training with me." I said, "Sure. I'd like to go along and give it a go." So I did that, and I've got to be honest, I hated it. Right? I hated it because coming from a traditional sort of striking background, I went into something which, even though I've always been sort of physically strong, like I said, I played a lot of rugby, and but there's quite a lot of intricacies in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu which I weren't really picking up so fast, and that frustrated me quite a bit. So I wasn't a big fan of it. And then I had some shoulder issues from playing rugby. I dislocated my shoulder 8 times and had surgery and so on and so forth. And I remember in one Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, we was doing the warm-ups, just the forward rows. And I did a forward row and my shoulder dislocated. And it took me out for a while again. When I recovered from that, I went back to my Thai boxing class. And I was like, yeah, I'm just happy doing this. But then it actually turns out that in the same place I was doing Thai boxing, they're actually going to start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. Right, and it's directly after my Thai boxing class.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I might as well try again, right? I've got no excuse not to try it again. Different place, different environment, and I've got to be honest, I actually loved it at this time. So I think it was more the environment, which I wasn't a big fan of originally. So so that's what I did, and it started from there, and then I pretty much started focusing on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
How old were you at this stage when you started focusing?
I was in my early 20s, so it wasn't long after uni. So I started doing that, and like I said, I loved it, but it was a bit of a headache because where I trained was in Victoria. It moved to London Bridge in the end. I worked in Waterloo, but I lived in Croydon. So at this stage, I'd kind of moved away from Southwest, and I was living in sort of Croydon. And the travelling was just a bit of a headache, right? So I found myself training less and less. So I was like, I need to find somewhere closer to where I live. So I started looking around for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu around sort of Croydon, Crystal Palace and so on and so on. And there was nothing, literally nothing. But there was an MMA gym. And I say MMA gym, it's like an MMA class, which was held at the Harris Academy in Crystal Palace, right? And that was literally, I think at the time it's like 3 evenings a week. And there's a bunch of guys training MMA. So I went along to that and I watched and I was like, okay, well, yeah, you know, it's nice and local, it's 5 minutes from my house. I'd like to give this a go. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is it's all part of my journey and all ties in because that place was New Wave Academy, right? So the story is, which I'll get to, the story is with New Wave Academy, which I think we're up to 2008 now, when I went along to the Harris Academy in Crystal Palace to start training MMA.
18 years ago.
Well, yeah,
2026, so-
exactly.
Yeah.
So went along there and started training MMA, and our coach was a guy called Nico Shipzak. Now Nico Shipzak went on to fight in the UFC, and my business partner, good friend as well, Colin Nwadike, who runs New Wave Academy with me, he was also someone who was training there. This is like I said, it wasn't like a full-time gym. We hired the school hall. We had to put the mats out every session and then put them away again at the end, you know, and you know, so now 2012, Nick, our coach, decided he was done with MMA and he wanted to walk away from the MMA scene. And he asked myself and Christian, he said, look, I want you guys to take over New Wave Academy. And we're like, we don't really want to do that, you know, we're busy enough, we've got our own full-time jobs. And
What do you do for work, is it, in terms of what you were doing full-time at the time?
so I've got a finance background.
Finance,
so
okay, yeah.
I worked as an accountant for 14 years.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
outside of university, I went and studied accountancy and worked within commerce for a number of companies. And yeah.
So I guess that business acumen will probably come into play later when we get into the...
Well, exactly,
Anyway.
exactly. So in the end, Christian and I, we agreed. We said, okay, look, because Nick said, if you guys don't take over, I'm just basically going to close the team down. And we was like, okay, we don't want that to happen. So we took over. We started teaching the classes. We were kind of teaching classes anyway. Especially when Nick had fight camps and he had to go away and prepare for fights, and you know, we were covering his classes. So then we started taking over. But then we said to ourselves, look, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly, right? So we're going to try and save every penny we get. We're going to try and find a full-time location. And and when we find somewhere, we're probably going to take out a bank loan. And that's what we did. So eventually we found a location, 2014. It took over a year to get planning permission from Croydon Council. It was absolute, I've got no idea why, but our good friend Laura Jane Clark, big shout out to her. She's top architect, but also she trained with us, and she was just on them, and she basically got us our planning permission. So 2015 we opened New Wave Academy Training Centre, our first one, which is in Croydon. So yeah, and that's been the journey. So it wasn't until we had our first full-time place that we was able to actually introduce all the other classes that we do now. So we was able to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we was able to do sort of Thai boxing, we was able to introduce kids classes and so on and so forth, and it's basically just gone from there. And that's kind of been my journey from sort of 9 years old to the first opening of New Wave Academy, and yeah.
Incredible. And so, if we were to go into the section of going from like almost athlete fighter to then becoming coach, and then evolving into almost like entrepreneur and like fitness entrepreneur, what was it like taking each of those steps? Because obviously, it's one thing. Each one has its own challenges in a way,
Yeah.
and so obviously, patience is required for all of them. Probably a bit more patience when you get to the entrepreneur phase versus when you're an athlete, when it's essentially the buck stops with you. When you now build out, you've got a team of people. So how did that evolution take place, and what was each stage like?
So it's kind of natural in terms of, I mentioned before how even when we were students of Nick's, we were coaching,
Yeah.
right? So we were coaching from the beginning anyway. Myself, I was still competing actively in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu up until about 3.5 years ago, and the only thing that stopped me was injury. So I still plan to return. So what's your space, right? So so it's coaching alongside alongside competing and training. Now, as the team grew, myself and Christian, we couldn't cover all the classes, and especially not just as the team grew, but as we opened other gyms as well. So we opened Bromley in 2022, then we opened Penge last year, which makes it impossible, you know, because you've got so many classes running each week, and each of the gyms, they're all full-time gyms, right? They're morning to evening, sort of, you know, they're 7 days a week. You know, so you make a natural sort of transition where you actually start, you know, taking your foot off the gas a bit more with regards to coaching, and you bring in a whole bunch of coaches. When I say bring in, you know, a lot of our coaches, one thing we like to do is we like to promote from within. You know, so a lot of our coaches are people that have trained with us for years, and you know, they've come through the ranks, and you know, they're coaches in their own right. And to be fair, pretty much most of them, if not all of them, they're better at what they do than what I do, right? In terms of, you know, like the guys who are Thai boxing coaches, they're better strikers than me. The guys who are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coaches, they're better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than, you know. So I think it's out of necessity with regards to the growth of the business that we kind of stepped away more from just being coaching all the time. Now myself and Christian, we still coach, but we tend to focus mainly on kids classes, you know, and we spend, sort of 3 or 4 days a week each, sort of, you know, coaching kids. You know, we still dabble here and there, cover classes where it's needed with regards to adult classes. You know, but as like I said, as the business grows, and you know, it's been a monster for a few years. So then the priority becomes actually managing the monster, right? You know, and you mentioned sort of, you know, the transition to being an entrepreneur. I don't really call myself, certainly not a fitness entrepreneur. Right? Okay, I'm a martial artist.
Of course,
You know, I'm not in the fitness space. I don't ever sort of claim to be. Of course, you know, like fitness is a big part of martial arts, and it's a byproduct of martial arts as opposed to anything else. So, and it's a big operation. You know, we've got a lot of students across the 3 locations. We've got a lot of coaches, quite a few full-time coaches who work exclusively for us. You know, and that takes up a lot of time and a lot of management, and you know, and whether it's the marketing, whether it's, you know, dealing with our accountants, or you know, doing payroll, doing the like I said, marketing, social media, so on and so forth, and just the day-to-day issues. You know, like we're constantly in contact with our members, and you know, we're very accessible. We're not sitting in some sort of, you know, ivory tower somewhere. You know, people see us every day. They know who we are. So when there's issues or anything else, they know they can actually text us directly, and you know, so you know, there's a lot going on which actually divides up your time a lot more than just being a coach. And so there we
That's
go.
incredible. Now, a lot of the people watching here will be inspired by your story, hearing that you had injuries, you were competing, you've now looking to come back into competition, you still train regularly. What would you say are some of the like key principles that you live by that have sort of kept that competitive edge in yourself in your sort of 20s onto your 30s maybe, and to like what are some of the principles that you kind of live by, or the mindset to keep yourself physically competitive whilst one could easily sit back and be like, oh yeah, that was back in the day, and live off of the accolades? Because again, like from what I remember, you've won multiple competitions. From those who don't already know your accolades in BJJ, what can you tell us a bit?
Sure. Cool. Okay, so if I answer the first part of your question,
Yeah.
what keeps me motivated? I've always been a competitor, right? And even when training, the thing that always kept me motivated to turn up and train every single week, through the injuries, through the tiredness and everything else, is always having a goal. And that goal was always like that particular title, or I know at some point I'm going to meet that particular opponent, or so on and so forth. You know, I always had that motivation pushing me on. Of course, when you get injured, you're not competing as much. You know, you've got to find a way to kind of replace that motivation. Now, one thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially when you're a black belt, is you've always got a target in your back. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, right? In the gym, you've kind of got a hierarchy of young, eager people who always want to, like, test where they are. And that's the white belts, the blue belts especially, and so on and so forth. And in the best possible way, they're not trying, they always want to see how what they've done when you're rolling, compared to last time or compared to a year ago or so on and so forth. So you've got to stay in your game, right? You've got to stay, you've got to, you can't let it go completely, otherwise, otherwise the student will call the master at some point, so yeah. So with regards to some of the stuff that I've won, I mean, with regards to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, I travelled around the world quite a lot, and the IBJJF, which is the largest organisation in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I won the European Masters 3 times in Barcelona. I've won Naga expert belts, gi and no gi. I've won countless sort of smaller IBJJF competitions, London Open, I can't even remember how many.
Sorry, I just had to get that.
Yeah, so
no, that's proper.
I was world number 1 2018 for my division, and that's world number 1. So, and if I remember correctly, I was the only person in the UK in the top 50. And and that was after a full season of competing, so it was, what was funny about that was I didn't even realise the rankings existed, not until I was world number 5, when someone said, oh, do you realise you're world number 5, right? Because it's not something I ever looked at on the website. And then when I realised, I was like, oh, okay, let's push for this now. And then I won a few major tournaments, which sort of doubles your points with regards to competition scoring. And yeah, I went from there. So yeah, that's a big breakdown.
Cool. Now again, you've got a build too, but the thing is, someone wouldn't know how dangerous a man you are walking around because you carry yourself with humility, groundedness. But to become, the fighting machine you are, what type of training were you putting in terms of like time-wise, rolling on the mats, or any training in the gym to get yourself physically prepared to that level? Without sharing any extra secrets, because I know as you're returning, you don't want to give away too much, but just enough to kind of let the next gen know the amount of commitment that's required to get there.
Okay, a fighting machine. Let's take it easy now. I wouldn't call myself a machine in any respect, But with regards to, and I will say, there's a number of the younger guys within the gym, especially, who put in a lot more work than what I ever did. Their level of commitment to training, diet, weight training, is absolutely amazing to watch. Of course, all those factors play a part. If you're preparing for a competition, you need to have competition style training. So you need to up the intensity with regards to some of the rounds that you do. A strength and conditioning program is also essential because you're grappling, you're on a physical martial art, but also as well, one thing about weight training is that it makes you, if it's the right term, more bulletproof, right? You're very susceptible to injuries, unless you've incorporated a weight training program, to kind of sort of strengthen and protect your ligaments and joints and bone density and so on and so forth. And and if you don't have that, at some point you are going to pick up injuries, especially doing something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, if your goal is to compete, but not just compete, but actually be successful, you're going to have to dedicate a fair portion of your week towards that goal.
So would you say, let's say someone training five days a week, perhaps once before work, once after work, or would like three times a week suffice? Obviously, I'm asking more for those who don't know, just to kind of put it into numbers. If we were to say, is it like, okay, are we training like doing weights before gym, rolling after in the evening, or is it something whereby like you're committing like 20 hours a week towards your training? Or would maybe 5 hours a week suffice
I mean, it depends on.
for you? Like, is it obviously I know each
No,
individual, but what worked for you at that stage when you were?
I mean, I certainly wasn't. I certainly wasn't doing 20 hours a week.
Okay.
You know, but I had I think a lot of advantages over a lot of people with regards to, maybe I had some sort of physical gifts with regards to, I certainly was anyway, stronger than, you know, the average person. And that's just from a lifetime of, you know, doing the sort of sports that I did. But there's levels, right? And within Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's levels. You know, you've got the regional local circuit, but you've also got the international professional circuit. Now, if you're looking to be a black belt world champion at that sort of highest professional level, 5 hours a week is not going to cut it, right? These guys are pretty much full-time athletes, and they live that life. You know, if you're kind of just on the regional circuit, you know, you're doing small local competitions, then yeah, whatever works for you. You know, sometimes maybe that is enough, you know, to actually be successful.
Maybe. Yeah. So would you say 10? If you're able to commit 10 hours a week, maybe 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, you're in a good stead to almost see the best of yourself? Or would you say that 10 is almost just we're now getting somewhere? But
no, absolutely. That's probably, yeah, the sort of area where, you know, successful people, that's the amount of hours they're putting in.
okay, yeah.
But like I said, everything depends on the individual. You know, some people put in a lot of hours and don't really see much success. Some people put in a lot less and are more successful, you know, so,
Absolutely.
you know, but yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, you know, you see it across the board, especially in UFC, where some fighters, they just almost naturally, it just seems to come to them, they don't have to think about it as much. Whereas you have others whereby they just have to keep on putting the work in and practicing time and time again. So there's no right or wrong for each individual.
Sure.
It's about understanding yourself. So now that we're coming here towards the end of this, as you may have seen before, I've got the book, The 12 Boxing Principles of Success.
Yep.
And I want to see how these principles translate over to BJJ. So,
Okay.
and also to the world of business.
Sure.
Because myself, my actual background started in grappling. So I started in judo when I was 7, 8 years old at school. Just did a few like Surrey mini-mon competitions, won those. But I think what happened is I got put into a wrong weight category one time. As it happens, you get beat. I was young, and at the time, that was enough for me to be like, forget this stuff. Let me just do something a bit more fun.
Sure.
But the principles that I've learned through like boxing when I came back into combat sports when I was older, everything from faith, vision, teamwork, focus, hard work, dedication, discipline, the will to win, resilience, confidence, respect, humility, and legacy. They've served me, you know, getting me physically fit, mentally in shape, and not just for boxing, but just for life, any battles that we face in life. Out of these principles, which 2 or 3 perhaps stand out to you and have helped you in terms of your journey in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a martial artist, but also as an entrepreneur? And again, you can choose different ones, the ones that applied most as an athlete and coach, or maybe some which apply more towards entrepreneurship and running gyms.
It's interesting because I'm looking at those 12 principles there, and all of them resonate. I think all of them you need to be successful with regards to a sport, whatever sport it is you do. But they certainly cross over with regards to running a successful business. So, okay, so let's look at business first. Vision, faith. I say that because, you know, a lot of the time, you know, you're doing things with a complete leap of faith and, you know, believing in yourself that you'll eventually, you know, get the results based on what you put in. Teamwork, because you can't do it on your own. You can't do it on your own, especially, you know, once something gets to a certain size, you need good people around you. Focus. I mean, you know, I'm literally going to go through all of them, and because I think it's very hard for me to isolate any of those and kind of say, well, this relates to business and this relates to sort of, you know, sporting endeavours. But okay, so let's just say we stop there. Okay, but if we're doing a crossover, then discipline is really important with regards to success on the mat. Resilience, respect, humility. And I say respect and humility because you've got to have respect for your training partners. You know, you've got to have respect for the art that you do. And you've certainly got to have humility. And it's interesting, because it's one thing I always say to, especially the kids when we do our gradings, one thing I say is, you know, like, first of all, I congratulate them for kind of making it to the stage of the grading, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu especially is a sport where the majority of people quit, right? The percentages are so low for the people who actually get to their first belt, let alone by the time you get to black belt. You know, we start getting into sort of the 0.00 sort of, you know, sort of percentages. And one thing I say with regards to humility, one thing I always say to the kids is you have to spend quite a lot of time being the nail before you become the hammer, right? And nobody escapes that. It's a journey we've all got to go through. And it teaches you to be humble, because a lot of people have got great ideas about who they are and what they're capable of until they walk into an environment which, don't get me wrong, it's all very friendly and it's all very nice, but you realise exactly where you are in the ecosystem, right? When you go up against someone who you're like, oh my gosh, you know, and it's a wake-up call, and it humbles a lot of people. And a lot of people kind of work with that humility and are inspired by it for them to move forward. And some, maybe it's too much of a blow to the ego and they walk out and you never see them again, right? So, legacy, certainly with regards to the brand, you know, I'd like to think long after I'm gone, you know, New Wave Academy will carry on. And like I said, I think I mentioned earlier in the, I use the term managing the monster, right? And it is a bit of a monster with regards to, it doesn't just rely on myself or Christian. I can go away on a holiday for a week, a month, 2 months, or 3 months. Not that I take 2-3 month holidays, but if I did, it would still run on its own. Right? We've got great people on the team. We've got reception staff. We've got coaches. Everybody knows their roles. Everybody knows what they should be doing.
Shout out to Coach Tommy. I see Tommy. He's again a gentleman. I don't know all of your coaches, but Tommy is a coach because I see around and stuff. I see the content he produces on social media, and even sometimes I don't even do MMA, but I'll still be watching his videos, his breakdowns, and be like, ooh, I can see that and how it applies. But sorry, continue.
You know what? And I'm glad you mentioned Tommy, because you know, Tommy's someone who needs to get his flowers as a coach, as a person. Now, Tommy has been with us at New Wave Academy since he was a teenager. And even though he still looks like a teenager now, he's actually, you know, he's been with us for many years, and he's come through the ranks, and you know, and he's a well-respected MMA coach on the scene. You know, on social media, for anyone who's interested, it's Dream Chaser Tommy, right? So, and the stuff he puts out there, even if you're not someone who's interested in martial arts like that, the way how he breaks things down and his analysis and the technicality, I think most people can pick something up from it. You know, so yeah, Tommy's fantastic, and he's just one of the many great people we've got at New Wave Academy, and we're very lucky to have him. You know, and like I said, he's been with us for many, many years. He's a full-time coach of us. You know, that's his full-time job. You know, and he lives it. And like I said, he's brilliant. And like I said, Tommy's one of those guys who I was saying earlier as well, how a lot of our coaches, they're better at what they do than us, right? And Tommy was someone who started off as one of our students, myself and Christian. And now his knowledge of MMA and the MMA game, because obviously that's what he does and that's his thing. He's also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. You know, he's very well-rounded. Far surpasses my knowledge now of where he is. So yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely. And so just to sort of wrap things up, obviously we spoke about Tommy just there briefly and the legacy you're creating between yourself and Christian and the team of coaches and receptionists and everyone part of the New Wave Academy family. Who are some of perhaps the fighters who are on the circuits at the moment that we can watch out for as fight fans and people, also those who want to support, you know, local athletes who are, you know, going out there, seeing their dream, their goals, and want to achieve it?
You know what, we're very blessed at the moment. We've got a lot of young talent coming through. If I was to give you the people to look out for immediately, we've got a couple of professional fighters who, one of them is Kenu Silvakaran, the Tamil Tiger.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you've seen him.
Yeah.
He's got like 250,000 followers on Instagram.
Okay, wow,
He's,
yeah.
you know, he's, and he's fantastic. He's got his next pro fight coming up very soon. Really exciting fighter. He's going to go far. He's been training with us for a few years, and awesome. We've got another professional fighter, Festus Aholu. Unfortunately, he fought on Saturday, didn't get the result. You know, he got caught with a really, really nice heel hook, just unexpected, got caught really quickly. But honestly, he's got so much potential. That's just a slight blip in the road. He'll be back, you know, so look out for him. With regards to the younger generation, we've got a youngster called Cameron Price.
Okay, yeah.
And he's exciting. I always laugh about Cameron because I joke that I call him Tommy's handbag, right? Because wherever you see Tommy, you see Cameron with him, you know. So he's like a real sort of, you know, Padawan, real student of Tommy, and you know, Tommy's just trained him up. Not just Tommy, because we've got other great coaches, but Tommy's his main guy who's guided him. And honestly, his potential is through the roof. I think he's 18 now. He fought on Saturday as well. Had a really, really good fight. Came out on top, and he's got a big future. I mean, he's one of the youngsters who a lot of people are talking about on the scene, on the circuit. So we're really excited to see where his journey goes. I'd say those three are probably the ones who are worth mentioning right now. Like I said, there's a lot of others. You know, I think in a bit more time, you know, we could have this conversation again in maybe a year's time, and I'll give you a few more names to look out for. You know, but we're working in the lab, and we're getting a lot of guys ready.
I love that. And so, like, comes final two questions now. Well, one question and one challenge.
Yep.
So first, final question. A lot of people out here are facing battles in life. Like, as martial artists, we get to face it in the ring or on the mats, but even outside the mats, you know, life will test us no matter what. So what message would you have for those who are facing their battles currently in life to help inspire, motivate, and empower them to overcome them and get through those?
Good question. And I think, you know, we all face challenges. One thing about living on this plane and living on this earth is, you know, the tough times, nobody avoids them. You know, and one thing we've got to do is find a way to get through them. Now, if I was to kind of be a little bit philosophical, but there is no dark without light, and vice versa. Yeah. You know, I was just having a conversation with Alexei Egorov, his name is, the other day, and we was just talking about, you know, not allowing yourself to kind of like get too high, because there will be a down, and don't be too down, because you know you know, just try and be as stoic as possible throughout life. Now, for every challenge, you know, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. So keep sticking through it. You know, the good times will come, and I know it seems like, you know, when would that ever happen, or you know, and especially because people are dealing with things in their own personal life. But at the moment in the world we're living in the moment, it's a very sort of weird environment, you know, and I know that's affecting people in different ways with regards to global events. But good times are coming, okay? Keep your chin up, right? Smile, be positive, surround yourself with good people, right? That's really important. Surround yourself with good people, and, you know, the light will eventually come. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
And wow,
It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I see that handshake there. So now
I knew this was coming.
now
Right.
we got the grip into play.
Okay.
So good.
Now listen, I'm gonna a little disclaimer here. Now, depending on what my score is, okay, will determine whether this video comes out at all. Only joking. Let's.
So essentially, I'll show you how it works. Because again, grip strength there's a correlation between grip strength. It's a health marker. Then there's dozens of research saying that. So good grip, I say a stronger grip for a stronger life, because good grip means that as you get older, we've got more independence. We can use our hand. Good grip also means better circulation, so reduction of chances of getting things like dementia or other cardiovascular diseases. So how it works, nice and simple, good, we can even do it sitting down. You just give it a nice strong squeeze, gives you a number. There's no right or wrong, we've got just 56 there. Men's average is 43, there is no right or wrong. But now, let's go up. Let's get right.
Okay.
So just give it a nice
So
strong squeeze.
give me some techniques. Is it best for me to go down? Is it going to be
I'd say
pushed forward,
the
or is it like?
the official way that you do it, so that even like when you go to the Nico scan and you get a full body scan, they actually pull one of these out, test you there. They ask you just to keep your hand to the side and squeeze. I don't say it doesn't give you maximum power, but it gives you the most accurate representation of where your grip just is. I like to push through, but that's because I do a lot of punching, so that's where I feel like I'm strongest. Whether it works or not, it might just be placebo. But I'd say get a good strong grip and just drive it. So,
Okay, so let's give this a go.
That's it.
Oh, okay, that's not good. That's not good.
That's what we got.
No,
Okay,
no, let's do
46.5.
let's do that again. I know the average was I think I need to dry my hands. Right.
I'll do a try out. I'll give us a little wipe down.
Okay. So that's the warm up.
That was the warm up.
That was the warm up.
So again, so just. Oh, okay. Now
So you've got even stronger.
58.5.
How has he got a stronger grip than me? Right.
And that's part of it as well. Is like I do not a lot of grip strength training, but I do a lot of pull ups.
Right.
I think pull-ups is mainly where it is, but pound for pound, I'm. Hey, it's the Niger blood, so who knows?
Okay.
Let's go.
Right.
One more time.
Let's try again.
3, 2, 1. Squeeze. 3, 2, and 1. Yeah, we got higher there.
Slightly.
Yeah, that's higher.
Slightly.
48.2. But again, incredible score. Perhaps do you want to try the left? Because again, with my left. Ooh, wait, you're giving me powers. This is the highest I've ever got on my left, 54.4. Normally, I struggle to get 50. I think it's the iron sharpens iron.
Well, let's try. Right. The thing is, I'm a little bit weird, so I'm right-handed, but I'm left-footed, which apparently is not normal.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm left-handed, but I'm right. It's my stronger side.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
Try again. 3, 2, 1. Squeeze. 3, 2, 1, and relax. 48.9.
So that was the highest score on my left.
That's the highest one.
Okay.
On the left. So there we go. So
Okay, you know what? I'm still not happy with these 40s. I've got to get to 50.
Hey,
right? Let's do it again. Let's do it again next week.
Next week. There we go.
Okay.
It's lovely. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Eh?
Pleasure.